But more importantly, they said we're bad people. We weren't bad people. We were just basketball players winning. And that kind of stuck with me because they didn't know who we were or what we were about as individuals in our family life. So all that whining they did, why shake their hand? They were just...
Interview 14 basketball games became full-fledged battles under Bill Laimbeer. He was the Black Hat, the enforcer of Detroit's bad guys, and he loved elbows, pandemonium, and making sure his opponents knew who was the bully on the floor. However, beneath his brutal play was a spirit of competition that stoked some of the most intense rivalries in NBA history. Let's explore the tales that characterize a man who accepted his position as the ultimate villain in basketball. Charles Barkley, a confrontation between two tough individuals. There are some rivalries in basketball that go beyond the game and become intense personal altercations. Regarding Laimbeer, Charles Barkley was the opponent of one of his most intense fights. Barkley was more than a mere athlete. He was combative and arrived with Laimbeer's no-holds-barred mentality. As a result, the NBA witnessed two of the most resilient athletes ever clash in games that resembled street brawls more than basketball contests. Barkley refused to back down and kept up his own signature brand of hard play, getting in Laimbeer's face whenever he could. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, their games, especially those against the Pistons Sixers, became legendary. It was never clear to fans whether they were witnessing a wrestling battle or basketball. The two's trash-talking just made the situation worse. Regarding Barkley, Laimbeer once remarked, "He's all talk. Soft when the game gets rough, loud and arrogant." Barkley, however, was not going to tolerate any slights. He retaliated in his usual fashion, accusing Laimbeer of being the NBA's biggest cheap shot artist. One particularly memorable altercation between the two warriors occurred during a 1990 game that turned into a yelling match. Laimbeer boded Barkley with hard fouls and unrelenting defense for the majority of the night. Barkley retaliated violently, which resulted in a situation where, in order to separate the madam, teammates had to intervene. It encapsulated the ferocious intensity both players brought to victory, and the crowd adored it while the referees detested it. These conflicts were much more than just physical. They were battles of the mind. Barkley attempted to outsmart Laimbeer, but Laimbeer rattled Barkley and distracted him with every tactic in the book. They collaborated to produce some of the NBA's most memorable and furious games. Drama and pure Showtime nemesis competition in a combustible combination. Showtime's adversary is James Worthy. Grit and mayhem are what fans envision when they think of the Bad Boys Pistons. Additionally, people see simple execution and fluid passes when they think of the Showtime Lakers. Laimbeer and James Worthy were at the center of the conflict between opposites, a rivalry characterized by annoyance and even acrimonious playoff struggles. Worthy was everything the Pistons weren't to Laimbeer. In transition, he moved quickly and was nearly hard to stop. Laimbeer made it his mission to break Worthy's rhythm whenever they met because of this. Finesse is all that is Worthy. In an interview, Laimbeer once stated, "When the games get tough, he vanishes," and Laimbeer made sure they did. He actually enjoyed making games look bad because he thought it gave him an advantage over skilled players like Worthy. Their battles on the court were a titanic conflict between physicality and talent. The Pistons used hard fouls, persistent pressure, and unrelenting defense to try to stop Worthy. It was like a heavyweight bout in basketball. Worthy didn't take things lightly and didn't think twice about delivering his own hard play or retaliating when needed. Laimbeer used to quip that Worthy did more than merely run the floor. He stayed out of the elbow's way. The NBA Finals in 1988 and 1989 were the height of this hostility. He proved why he was known as a big game player by defeating the Pistons and Lakers in both seasons. Laimbeer was enraged by his clutch efforts in the 1988 Finals, which included triple-doubles and crucial plays in the Lakers' victory in Game 7 of the title. Worthy was occasionally slowed down by Laimbeer's bruising techniques, but they were never able to completely subdue him. They fought more psychologically than physically. Worthy played with poise and maintained his composure despite the Pistons' constant pressure. It explains why their conflicts are still discussed today and why every conflict felt more like a clash of opposites. Larry Bird trash talk, tough love, trash talk, and Larry Bird. Larry Bird was the one player who was genuinely hated. It was more than simply Bird's phenomenal stats or ability to outshoot everyone on the court. It was his ability to get under people's skin and his scathing trash talk. Bird stood for everything Laimbeer detested. Bird was well aware of it. The Pistons and Celtics played each other in the middle of the 1980s, when the league was dominated by hard, physical basketball. Laimbeer was Detroit's bruiser, and Bird was Boston's star. Their games turned into some of the most intense contests in the NBA. Every opportunity Laimbeer had, he went at Bird, fouling him hard and slowing his shot with body checks. Bird. He smirked and continued to swish as if nothing had occurred. Bird was skilled at manipulating players like Laimbeer. Bird is said to have hissed, "That's why you'll never win," after draining a jumper over Laimbeer during one memorable game. Laimbeer took exception with that remark. On the following possession, he fouled the foul with such force that he fell into the audience. It was the ideal illustration of their heated conversations. Temper flaring, Lumber retaliating, and Bird's talking. Laimbeer was even more enraged with Bird since he could support his trash talk, even though the Pistons tried to hit him with every foul in the book. Bird had a knack for keeping them quiet, whether it was through clutch threes in close playoff games or fadeaway shots over Detroit's defenders. Larry gets away with everything. He talks, he flops, and they call him a legend, Laimbeer remarked. Robert Parrish. Quiet assassin, quiet killer. There weren't many rivalries as intense or violent as the one between Robert Parrish and Laimbeer. Laimbeer's aggressive, hostile attitude was perfectly complemented by Parrish, the Celtics' stoic big man, who was renowned for his cool-headedness and unwavering tenacity. However, stillness does not equate to weakness. Parrish was as capable of punishing as he was of receiving it. Furthermore, despite his quiet demeanor, he allowed his acts to send a loud and painful message when facing Laimbeer. Their conflicts were vicious. Laimbeer made it plain that he would not allow the Celtics to control the paint from the first time the Celtics and Pistons faced off in the late 1980s. However, Parrish was not a player who was easily intimidated. These two repeatedly engaged in physical altercations, exchanging elbows, grabbing rebounds carelessly, and dishing out more shoves than shots. However, in a game that has since become famous during the 1987 playoffs, the antagonism reached a boiling point. Laimbeer had spent years honing his ability to irritate Parrish. Aggressive fouls, trash talk, and cheap shots. Parrish, however, lost it this time. Parrish repeatedly punched Laimbeer in the middle of the match, right in front of the spectators and cameras. Parrish remained composed after being dismissed as the audience exploded. For him, justice had been done. Later, Parrish said, "We weren't there to dance. You risked losing respect if you didn't stand your ground." Surprisingly, many players, including those who weren't Celtics, sighed with satisfaction when Parrish was punished. Always unrepentant, Laimbeer brushed off Parrish's behavior, declaring, "He's the real dirty player. He simply doesn't talk about it. Therefore, you don't hear about it." Years later, Parrish retaliated by criticizing Laimbeer's fixation on mind games. Unless you became physical with him, you didn't survive him. The invincible power. The unstoppable force is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was one of the few players who was more than just Laimbeer's opponent. Being MJ meant more than simply being the league's top player. He was an invincible force that prevented the Pistons from becoming dominant. Additionally, the Pistons' infamous Bad Boys squad had to physically and psychologically defeat MJ in order to stop him. Cue Jordan's notorious rules. These regulations were straightforward but brutal. Keep MJ from breathing. He was subjected to severe fouls and almost continual physical punishment each time he entered the paint. This harsh tactic was enforced by Laimbeer, who made sure Jordan felt every bit of Detroit's defensive pressure. Michael wasn't really noteworthy. At one point, Laimbeer minimized Jordan's greatness by saying, "He just got all the calls." However, the Pistons were aware of the situation behind closed doors. MJ's determination to succeed was just as important as his abilities. He was a nightmare because of that. The rivalry changed by 1991, and Laimbeer didn't like it. The bad boy era came to an end when MJ and the Bulls defeated Detroit in the Eastern Conference Finals, sweeping the Pistons. Laimbeer left the court without shaking his hands, displaying his frustration. "You beat them, and suddenly they're too proud to face the loss," Jordan remarked afterwards. Even though Laimbeer frequently downplayed Jordan's accomplishments in interviews, he must have known deep down that MJ was destined for greatness. MJ's destruction of the Pistons elevated him to high basketball status. Leaving Detroit and Laimbeer behind. A blend of grit and skill, Kevin McHale. A combination of hard work and talent. Laimbeer encountered a new kind of opponent when he fought men. It is driven by brains and skill rather than force. The renowned forward for the Celtics, Male, used cunning post moves, cunning defense, and unwavering poise to create a nightmare for defenders. Male stood for everything that Laimbeer couldn't stand, and he flourished in pandemonium. A player without the need for fizz. When Laimbeer's brutal manner and the Male's skill clashed in the 1980s Celtics-Pistons playoff games, the rivalry erupted. The Male wasn't, "You don't win games by throwing elbows. You win by scoring," Laimbeer said. But he was scared to call him out. Hard fouls, Laimbeer's reaction, and his refusal to give Male a sense of comfort on the field. Despite his reserved manner, Male's cunning allowed him to degrade Laimbeer. Few were able to outsmart defenses in the post like him, and Laimbeer had to work hard to stop him. Laimbeer was so irritated by it that he began calling men obnoxious in interviews. "He doesn't use toughness to defeat you. He is smarter than you, so he beats you. And it can be worse at times." One particularly noteworthy play occurred in a tense 1987 playoff match. Male sealed the Celtics' victory with a clutch shot against Laimbeer with just seconds remaining. That scowl of Laimbeer's said it all. Once more, Male had defeated him. Men would reminisce about their rivalry years later and claim that Laimbeer attempted to make every game into a bar brawl. "All I did was play hoops." Bill Laimbeer saw these rivalries as more than just on-court conflicts. They were pride and identity battles. Every opponent posed a different difficulty. Thus, Laimbeer had to accept his position as the NBA's worst enemy. Whether you like him or not, Laimbeer flourished in the tumult, and his rivalries are still among the most memorable in basketball history. History of basketball. Okay, that concludes this one. Remember to click subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.